Hello, my name is Marty Windle, the SBL Guru. So what I'm here going to do today is I'm going to go through the June exam. We've got the examiner's reports. I'm just going to try to bring up some of the lessons talked about by the examiner in the examiner's report. So let's go and look at that examiner's report. And first of all, we're going to look at things that students did wrong in the examination. So the first thing they did wrong is in the exam, you're going to be given exhibits on the day of the exam. Most of the information you're given on the day of the exam, you need to use in your answer. So the big mistake students made is they based their entire answer on the pre-scene, which is really only about 5% of the examination. Your exam answer must come from the post-scene exhibits. So the big mistake students made is they did not use the post-scene exhibits to generate relevant points in your answer. So just remember that most of the time, the pre-scene is only going to be 5% of your exam. 95% is going to be in the post-scene exhibits. Read them and use them in your answer. Next thing is a lot of wasted time in the exam. So students were criticized by the examiner, not my words, but the words of the examiner. But they wrote things down which were not relevant to the task requirements. You've got to be like a sniper in the exam and only focus on those task requirements. So for example, some people in the briefing notes, they wrote big, long introduction. My advice is always the same. Keep your introduction as short as possible because it doesn't gain marks in the examination. Briefing paper should be a brief paper, to, from, subject, straight into your answer. You do not need long introductions. They will not gain marks in the exam. The other issue that people talked about in the examiner's report, was repetition. Students were repeating the same points in the exam in slightly different ways. And important message here from the examiner, if you repeat points in the exam, you will not get any additional marks in the exam. If you restate them in a slightly different way, they're not going to give you any points in the exam. The examiner is very aware. It's very obvious when I've been doing marking, when people are making a very similar point, don't do it. Different points is what you need in the examination. Now, if you're a good candidate, what you're trying to do is to achieve that magic synergy. You're going to use the information from the exhibits. You're going to have technical knowledge. Don't listen to the people on the internet, oh, SBL is so easy. Just 2 weeks before the exam, just watch a couple of videos, you'll be fine. You need to have that strong foundation of technical knowledge. You need to understand the pre-scene. The pre-scene is the background. The background of the case, very important. But the key thing is you are going to use the information from the post-scene, a little bit from the pre-scene, and apply the points. Link your points to the case in the exam. So I always talk about the apples, the 3 apples, application. Application is the key to your examination. Also, the thing that students do well, if they're going to pass the exam first time, is they get the professional marks. They score well on the professional marks in the exam. So they know all those 5 professional skills marks and they get all those 5 professional skills marks in the examination. So be one of those good students, understand what the professional marks for, and also understand how to gain those professional marks. I spend a lot of time on my boot camp, my SBL revision boot camp, talking about professional marks and how to get those professional marks in the exam. That's 20% of your mark. That makes a big difference whether you're going to pass or fail the exam is professional marks. Now, also very important in the exam that good students spend time planning. The weak students, they just jump straight in the exam. Good students spend time planning the examination, working on the answer plan in the examination. So make sure, I always talk about this a lot in my revision course, how to build an answer plan in the exam, breaking the question down into its key requirements. Good students always do that. They spend a lot of time planning their answers, so they get a great structure in their answer. So let's look at the first question in the exam. What I want you to do is just pause this video, read this question, question 1A, and we've not got the case study with us. I'm not going to put the exhibits up. I just want you to look at the principles we're going for here. So what I want you to do is pause the video, read the question, and work out how many requirements are you going to talk about in this exam question. How many requirements are you going to talk about? So pause the video now, read the question. How many requirements in this exam question? Okay, so what is your answer? How many did you get? What's the number? Well, let's have a look at it. Let's break it down. There's actually quite a few requirements. The first thing here is 14 marks. So you're looking for around about 7 strong paragraphs in the exam. So you don't need to have to write loads on each point, but you need 7 strong paragraphs. How many requirements did you get? Well, let's break them down. The reason why I want you to understand this is because the complaint from the examiner was that many students did not read the task requirement carefully and did not answer all the requirements in the question, or only answered part of them in the exam. So when that happens in the examination, what that means for you is you're going to lose professional marks because you did not complete all the requirements. Definitely going to lose professional marks, but also you're going to lose technical marks in the examination. So it's a double loss in the exam. So it's very important when you read the question, how many requirements? So what I did was I broke it down, right? There's impact on brand, positive or negative, that's 2, right? Impact on innovation, location, and quality, positive or negative. So 2 things there. Is a franchise better? Talk about the better points, talk about the worst points, and then recommend a solution. So actually we've got a breakdown of 7 different things there. There's going to be 2 paragraphs maybe for each one of those that we're going to talk about. So that's what you're looking for in the examination, breaking that down. So we've got 7 elements we've got to talk about here in our answer. So what you've got to try and do is to break this down in the exam. Make sure you're hitting the points on innovation, quality. Break it down into 7 strong paragraphs in the exam. That's what we're looking for in the examination. Don't write everything on impact on brand and nothing on location, innovation, and quality. You've got to cover all those elements in your answer. And that's what the examiner said, but also balance positive and negative in the exam. So don't just write one side. Don't just write everything on one side. Try to do positive and negative side. So first thing you've got to do, a good technique, is how many requirements are there in the exam? How many things do I have to talk about? Break it down, and that should form part of your plan. What we're trying to do in the exam is we're going to try to combine our technical knowledge in the exam, but also link it back to the case, link it back to the details of the case. So we'd have to have technical knowledge of joint ventures, technical knowledge of franchising in the exam. But what we've got to try and do is then link that to the situation in the case. Does it work for this company? Does joint venture work for this company? What are the benefits? What are the problems? And this company they're going to have a joint venture with was like a low-cost company. And our company, based on the pre-scene, it's more of a quality-based company. So a lot of issues there you can talk about. But it's all about taking your knowledge, applying it in the case. That's what you've got to do, right? Take your knowledge and apply that in the case. So always think about strong technical knowledge. I'm going to use my knowledge of joint ventures and franchises, but make sure my point is relevant to the case. Give examples relevant to the case. Now, big part of this question was there's a need for a recommendation, and weak candidates fail to provide a recommendation. So again, losing technical marks, losing professional marks, and losing quite an easy mark in the exam, really. Now, whenever you do a recommendation for SBL, there must always be a reason. You must always give a clear reason about why you're recommending something in the examination. So it's a good point. If the question asks for recommendation, don't say, I would recommend franchising. Because if it's real world, people would say to you, why are you recommending franchising? What is the reason you're recommending franchising in the real world? So always think about recommendation must be justified. Give the reasons, and some of those might be a summary of what you've talked about. You've talked about the positive and negative. Say, well, actually, overwhelming that the positive outweigh the negative, or the negative outweigh the positive. So something you want to think about there. One thing the examiner talks about with franchising, again, people think SBL is so easy. 48 out of 100 people are going to fail SBL. Most of that is because they don't have the good technical knowledge. They've been told it's so easy. But a lot of people did not understand franchising and the difference between the franchisor and the franchisee. So you need to have technical knowledge. What I give people on my revision course, on the intensive revision course, is I give you the mind maps, which has got all the technical knowledge you need on 36 pages. So have technical knowledge. Don't neglect SBL. Don't think it's super easy. It's not. Most people fail SBL who take it. The examiner is very strict on this, right? Marks will not be awarded for the recommendation unless it is explicit and it should have a reasoned justification. So if you just put recommendation, we need to do further analysis, that is not going to get you any marks in the exam. You're supposed to be a consultant, and consultants are there to make decisions. Now, professional marks, I told you good students get the professional marks. So the professional marks here were for evaluation. Professional marks are for evaluation. Keyword there, in assessing the issues raised by the CEO. So it's not just write everything you know about a joint venture. If you want to get professional marks, you're only going to get professional marks if you discuss the issues raised by the CEO. So it's always, the tip here is look for the words after the professional marks, what the professional marks are for, evaluation, but they give you a guidance about what they're going to award those marks for. So if you're raising issues about joint venture which were not raised by the CEO, you will be losing professional marks or not gaining professional marks in the examination. Look at slide 2, presentation format. I'll just give you a second to read the question. So this is for communication skills, right? So how technology developments could deliver growth, the drawbacks and ethical issues. So again, how they could deliver growth. What are we going to do in our answer? Well, in our answer, we've got to say the reasons. We've got to explain why, or say why they're going to deliver growth, right? We've got to explain why. So when we write our answer, how technology can deliver growth, I gave you some different types of technology in the question. Give you an example of how it's going to gain growth and explain why. Don't just say, oh, this will lead to growth in sales. Say how, say why it's going to lead to growth in sales. Drawbacks of technology, again, don't just say, oh, it might be costly. Explain the ongoing costs. Give examples of ongoing costs like maintenance costs, training costs, the need to recruit expertise and specialist staff. So again, if you're going to pass SBL, they're looking for you always to explain your points. Also, ethical issues. Talk about some of those ethical issues. What are the ethical issues of technology? Some of the issues about data privacy, for example, could be important. So talk about that in relation to this case. Talk about it in relation to the company. It's all about applying your knowledge. Start with the knowledge, link it to the company, link it to the case. Big mistake students made. Oh, this technology will increase growth. This particular technology will increase growth. The examiner is going to get very frustrated. How? Explain how or explain why in the examination. Explain how or explain why in your answer. That is the key to passing SBL. I got one student, it always kept failing SBL. He came on my revision boot camp. He passed SBL. He said the secret was explain why. Always say why. Explain why. So professional skills requirement. The key thing here, what the examiner is looking for, is a balanced answer. So when you're talking about the benefits of technology or the drawbacks, don't just write down all drawbacks. Don't just write down all disadvantages. What the examiner is looking for are the benefits, but also looking at some of those problems. So don't have an answer where it's all drawbacks or it's all positive factors. You need to have a balance to get the professional skills marks. So try to, when you've got evaluation, at least consider both sides in the exam. If we look at the next one in the exam, I'm just again going to give you a minute to read this question, so just pause the video. So briefing notes on how CSR could impact on the key stakeholders and how it would enable growth in market share. So, we've got two things there. So how we're going to break down this question in the exam. Professional marks are for commercial acumen in awareness of the impact of stakeholders. So here we've got 16 marks. So we've got to hit quite a lot of paragraphs here, right? To get our answer, we need to hit a fair number of points. So don't just do 2 stakeholders. Make sure you're choosing stakeholders that are relevant to the case. Don't just write down a list of general stakeholders. Think about who are the relevant stakeholders in this case and in this company. So write down your stakeholders. Talk about the impact of this CSR policy. Will it have a positive impact? Will it have a negative impact on stakeholders in the organization? Positive or negative impact. So you need to choose quite a few stakeholders. This is quite a lot of marks in the examination. So you may be looking for like 5 different stakeholders. You can explain the impact and then explain how it will help growth. It's a lot of time explaining. Don't just say this will lead to growth. The key word is stakeholder impact. Don't write down everything you know about CSR. You've got to talk about it in relation to stakeholders. And that's where students, sometimes they go off the wrong end. They see the word CSR and they just knowledge dump everything they know about CSR. They start talking about balanced scorecard. But is that really relevant here? They're looking at the impact of the strategy on the stakeholders. So write down the stakeholder, write down the impact of the strategy on the stakeholder. Like if you talk about employees, maybe a positive impact, right? Attract more employees, attract talent into the organization. More people might want to work the veterinary practice. More people might want to work for the veterinary practice if they have a good CSR policy. You're attracting talent in the organization into the business. So look at the positive, but explain why and explain how that might grow. If you attract the best talent, you may be able to get more clients coming to your practice in the future. So it's going to have a potentially positive impact on you. People will recognize you can have a point of differentiation compared to other veterinary practices in the market. So it wasn't just write everything you know about CSR. You've got to talk about stakeholder impact, and that was the key for the question. Now, the important thing to remember for SBL, always think about, is your answer relevant for the exam? Is your answer relevant for the exam? What information do you have? Like the pre-scene, you should know a little bit about the case. Although the case is mainly about the post-scene, and maybe got a 5% that's about the pre-scene. So some students, they wrote down, CSR policy will attract the green investor. Well, it's kind of a lot of rubbish, because if you read the pre-scene, you know this company is owned by the people, by the director of the company. They don't have any outside investors in this organization, right? It's like a private company. It's not a listed company in the organization. It's owned by the founders. So think about the relevance of what you write. Always link it to the case. Always apply back to the case. So what did the examiner say? Well, some candidates were able to describe the different ways in which growth would be enabled, depending on the stakeholder. Too many were very general in the answer. They said it will lead to increased market share without developing their answer or explain how or explain why. I always talk about it as explain how or explain why. That is the key to passing SBL in the exam, right? So don't ever say, this can increase market share. Say how, say why. That's where you're going to get a pass in the examination. I keep on drilling that when I do my SBL revision course. Say why. When I'm marking the mock exams for the students, I'm always saying, please say why. Say why. I'm writing it in big red letters on their answer. So look at this question. What is the key word? It's 2B, keyword in the question. Pause the video. What is the keyword? Well, first thing, format a bit unusual. Email. Some people don't know how to write an email. It sounds like a letter. So it's just to, from, subject is the format, but don't write dear in an email. That's for a letter. Keyword, critically evaluate the job description. So critically evaluate good and bad sides, good points and bad points. So when you're doing a critical evaluation, positive and negative. Some students, they lost marks because all they wrote down was the negative parts. Critical evaluation is a combination of two elements, positive and negative. So also, many candidates focused on aspects needed improving, or they could find nothing good to say about it. So don't do an answer where you've got the word evaluate or critically evaluate. You need to have a balanced answer. Two sides is needed for your exam. Weaker candidates, when they're doing skepticism, they start to ask questions. Do you not think it's wrong to include this? They're asking questions. That's not how you do skepticism, right? There needs to be implications of your answer and explaining why. Explain why you're skeptical. Explain why it's wrong to include certain things in a job description. It could be sexist in a job description. So you've got to think about explaining, I'm skeptical that this is the correct thing to include because. So the key word is say why, because. So you must understand how to demonstrate skepticism. And to demonstrate skepticism, you do not ask questions. That's poor examination technique. If you've been taught to do that, change your lecturer. Last part, I think, probably saved a lot of people in the examination. Look for the keywords. Just pause the video and look for those keywords in the exam. Implication. So a lot of people did not do correctly. Implication of the control weaknesses. What is the implication? And appropriate controls to mitigate. So the key word is implication. It's not just writing down the weaknesses. You were told the weaknesses. They needed the implication of those control weaknesses. So what people did wrong is they didn't answer the question. Right? Many candidates provided a list of implications and recommendations with no reference to the specific weakness or requiring control. It led to a bad score in the exam. So if you're writing your answer, have a clear layout so the examiner can see clearly what you're referring to. Just don't dump everything on the page, right, in your answer. So you need to be very clear so the examiner can give you marks. If you just write down a whole load of stuff, the examiner's not clear what you've covered and what you haven't covered. So don't just write down a list. Make sure you've got headings. Guide the marker towards your exam. So weaker candidates, and again, some of these famous lecturers you hear about on the internet, they always recommend copy and paste. And the examiner, ACCA examiner, says don't do copy and paste. So most candidates, sometimes they just copied and pasted their answer into the question. They copied and pasted the question into the answer. It's not a good technique. It looks awful. It doesn't look professional in the exam. They copied and pasted and did not develop their answer. I recommend you never copy and paste, to be honest. So this wastes time. You spend all your time copying and pasting. It will not gain marks unless there is a development of the point. So don't just copy and paste stuff. It's not an exam where you're going to get marks for copying and pasting stuff. It looks rubbish as well in your answer. When you read it, it looks like you don't know what you're doing. So don't copy and paste stuff. It doesn't work. Just explain the point very briefly and then go and talk about the implications. Implication is impact. Explain why. As I keep telling people, always explain why. So don't copy and paste. Don't go with these lecturers that tell you to do that. It's rubbish technique. So that's a brief review of the June examination, like giving you some of the key things that students did wrong in the exam. I do have a revision course. You can scan this here for information about all my courses, full course, tuition plus revision. There's a double mock course based on the pre-scene, which was very successful in the last exam. So if you want to find out more information, please see these links and find the course that suits you. These links also contain all my free stuff. So if you want free stuff, you can't afford my courses, don't worry. I always give away a lot of free stuff to you. So all the links to the free stuff, including the amazing SBL Guru podcast, is there for you on these links. So please look at these links. Good luck in your examination. My name is Marty Windle, the SBL Guru. Good luck in your exam.